My dad abandoned my mom and me for his mistress, cut me off financially, and ignored me for years. When I was invited to his wedding, I found out something he didn't want anyone to know. Right before the vows, I exposed him in front of everyone. Now my whole family is furious. Am I the a-hole? I know how this sounds, but please hear me out. 5 years ago, when I was starting my first year of college, my world imploded. My dad, who I had always looked up to, left my mom after 23 years of marriage for his much younger secretary, Vanessa. The affair had apparently been going on for over a year before he finally decided to leave. My mom was completely blindsided. She had dedicated her life to supporting my dad's career, moving 3 times for his promotions, putting her own ambitions on hold to raise me, and managing our household while he built his business. When he left, he didn't just break her heart, he broke her spirit. She fell into a deep depression that took years of therapy to overcome. As for me, I was devastated. My dad had always been my hero. We were close, or so I thought. He coached my baseball teams, helped me with school projects, and had promised to pay for my college education. We had even toured campuses together, and he seemed excited about my future. But when he left, everything changed. At first, he claimed he would still fulfill his promise to fund my education, but Vanessa apparently had other ideas. Within months, he informed me that he could no longer afford to pay my tuition because he was starting a new life and had other financial obligations. Those obligations, I later learned, included Vanessa's shopping sprees, a luxury condo, and expensive vacations. I was forced to take out student loans and work part-time jobs throughout college. Meanwhile, my mom had to sell our family home and move into a small apartment because she couldn't afford the mortgage on her modest teacher's salary. She had been out of the workforce full-time for nearly 2 decades while supporting my dad's career, making it difficult for her to find well-paying work. During this time, my dad essentially disappeared from my life. He would occasionally send generic text messages on my birthday or major holidays, but he never asked how I was coping with the massive changes he had caused. He didn't attend my college graduation, claiming he and Vanessa had a non-refundable vacation booked. He didn't help when I was hospitalized with appendicitis and struggling to pay the medical bills. He wasn't there when my mom needed emergency surgery and I had to take a semester off to care for her. For 4 years, he chose Vanessa over any relationship with me. I tried to reach out multiple times, asking to meet for coffee or lunch, suggesting we try to rebuild some kind of relationship. He always had an excuse. He was too busy, it wasn't a good time, Vanessa wasn't comfortable with it. Eventually, I stopped trying. Then, 6 months ago, I received a wedding invitation. My dad and Vanessa were finally getting married. After years of minimal contact, I was suddenly expected to attend and celebrate their relationship, the very relationship that had torn my family apart. My first instinct was to throw the invitation away, but then I received a call from my dad, the first in nearly a year, asking me personally to come. He claimed he wanted to mend our relationship, that the wedding represented a fresh start for everyone. After some thought, I agreed to attend, hoping perhaps there was a chance to rebuild something from the ashes of our former relationship. 2 weeks before the wedding, I met an old family friend for coffee. He had worked with my dad for years, but had recently left the company. During our conversation, he mentioned something that caught my attention. He had seen my dad and Vanessa at a restaurant together 7 years ago, looking very intimate. 7 years ago, not 5, 7. This detail bothered me. The timeline didn't match what my dad had always claimed. According to his story, he and Vanessa had only begun their relationship 5 years ago, and he had promptly left my mom once it began. He had always insisted there was minimal overlap and that he had tried to do the right thing by leaving once he realized his feelings for Vanessa. I started digging, contacting other colleagues and friends of my dad. Gradually, a different story emerged. My dad and Vanessa hadn't been having an affair for 1 year before he left. It had been going on for 3 years. 3 years of lying to my mom's face, 3 years during which he had taken Vanessa on business trips, bought her expensive gifts, and even helped her purchase a car, all while telling my mom we needed to budget carefully for my college expenses. But what's worse, I discovered that my dad hadn't left my mom because he simply fell in love with someone else. He had left because Vanessa had given him an ultimatum after discovering she was pregnant, a pregnancy that had ended in miscarriage shortly after he left us, which was why there was no child. All these years, he had portrayed himself as someone who had regrettably fallen in love and made the difficult but honest choice to leave. In reality, he had been living a double life for years, only leaving when forced to choose. The final straw was learning that the financial obligations that prevented him from supporting my education weren't just about his new lifestyle. He had actually been funding Vanessa's younger sister's college tuition, paying for another young person's education while abandoning his commitment to his own child. By the time the wedding arrived, I was filled with a cold anger I had never experienced before. I sat through the elaborate ceremony, watching my dad beam at his bride-to-be, surrounded by mutual friends and colleagues who had no idea of the full truth. Many of these people had distanced themselves from my mom after the divorce, believing my dad's version of events. When the officiant reached the part about if anyone knows any reason why these two should not be wed, I stood up. My heart was pounding, but I felt strangely calm. "I have something to say," I announced. The church went silent, my dad's face drained of color. Vanessa looked confused. "I want everyone to know the truth about this relationship," I continued. "It didn't begin 5 years ago, as you've all been told. It began 7 years ago, while my dad was very much married to my mom. For 3 years, he led a double life, lying to all of us. He left my mom because Vanessa was pregnant and gave him an ultimatum, not because he was being honorable. And while he claimed he couldn't afford to pay for his own child's education, the church erupted in shocked murmurs. My dad was frozen in place, his mouth open but no words coming out. Vanessa's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide her reddening face. "I just thought everyone should have all the facts before celebrating this union," I finished, then walked calmly out of the church. The aftermath has been explosive. The wedding continued after a 30-minute delay, but according to guests, it was a tense, awkward affair. Many people left early, including some of Vanessa's family members, who apparently hadn't known the full circumstances either. My dad has been calling non-stop, alternating between rage and pleading. He claims I humiliated him on what should have been the happiest day of his life, that I had no right to interfere in his relationship. Vanessa's family is also furious, especially her sister, who may lose her tuition funding. Even some of my extended family members think I went too far. My aunt called me childish and vindictive. My cousin said that regardless of what my dad did, ruining his wedding was a nuclear option that can never be taken back. Some family friends have suggested that I should have confronted him privately instead of creating a public scene. My mom, for her part, didn't say much when I told her what happened. She just hugged me and said, "You shouldn't have had to carry this burden." I think she's worried about the potential fallout for me. I don't regret exposing the truth, but the intensity of the backlash has made me question whether my actions were justified. My dad did terrible things, but was publicly humiliating him and Vanessa at their wedding going too far? Am I the a-hole?